A US Navy ship has just been hit in the Red Sea, and the group claiming responsibility. The Houthis. Now the big question is, was it a mistake, or was it intentional? Either way, this moment could shift things in the Middle East, and maybe even far beyond. So what really happened, and what does it mean for the rest of us? Let's break it down. So first, a quick refresher, who are the Houthis? The Houthis are an armed political movement based in Yemen. They've been active for decades, but they came into global focus when they took control of Yemen's capital, Sana'a, back in 2014. Since then, they've been at war with Yemen's internationally recognized government, and that conflict has drawn in other nations, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The Houthis are often described as being backed by Iran, both militarily and politically. But they operate independently and make their own decisions when it comes to actions on the ground. So when we hear, Houthis hit a US ship, this isn't just a headline, it's a moment loaded with history, tension, and uncertainty. Now let's talk about what actually happened. A few days ago, in the already tense waters of the Red Sea, a missile launched from territory controlled by the Houthis struck a ship that belonged to the United States Navy. The ship wasn't some hidden or covert vessel. It was clearly identified, clearly marked, and part of a known US Navy presence in the area. That's important. Immediately after the strike, the Houthis took responsibility. But here's where things start to get murky. Some reports suggest the Houthis may have believed the ship was part of a Western supply chain connected to Israel, something they've said they're targeting in protest of the war in Gaza. Others argue the hit was deliberate, a way to challenge the growing military presence of the US in the region. So, was it a genuine miscalculation, or was this a direct message? Let's look at both sides of that argument. Scenario 1. It was a mistake. The Houthis have been targeting commercial and military-linked ships in the Red Sea for months now. Since the latest flare-up between Israel and Gaza, they've claimed it's their duty to disrupt supplies and stand in solidarity with Palestinians. And from their perspective, many Western ships, especially those traveling near conflict zones, are fair game. So it's entirely possible they misidentified the ship. In the chaos of war, mistakes happen. Radar, intelligence, and visuals don't always tell the full story. Maybe they were targeting a different vessel, or maybe they believed the US ship was involved in operations they oppose. If that's the case, the hit was tragic, but unintentional. Scenario 2. It was serious, and deliberate. On the flip side, it's also possible this wasn't a mistake at all. It could have been a calculated move meant to send a strong political message, not just to Israel, but to the US and its allies. Over the past few months, US warships have been stationed near Yemen, intercepting Houthi missiles and drones that were launched at other targets. Some of those warships have even conducted strikes against Houthi missile sites inside Yemen. So from the Houthis' perspective, the US is not a neutral observer. They might view the US Navy as a direct threat, and this strike could have been their way of pushing back. Either way, this wasn't just another incident in a far-off conflict. A strike on a US Navy vessel is a major development. And now, we're left with big questions. What will the US do next? And how far are both sides willing to go? Let's pause here and take a breath, because what's unfolding isn't just about two parties trading blows. It's about a region on edge. Because this happened in the Red Sea, one of the busiest and most important trade routes in the world. Every day, cargo ships carrying oil, gas, food, and goods for millions of people travel through this narrow passage. If it becomes a war zone, the entire global economy could feel the impact. Shipping delays, higher fuel prices, more instability, these are not far-off problems. They affect the price of everything from your groceries to your phone. Now, back to the military side. After the attack, the United States responded quickly. Not with a full-scale war, but with targeted strikes aimed at Houthi positions believed to be involved in launching missiles. So far, the US response has been described as measured, enough to show strength, but not enough to trigger an all-out escalation. But that line is thin. And it's easy to cross, especially if more attacks follow. And guess what? The Houthis aren't backing down either. In statements since the incident, their leaders have doubled down. They say they will continue to target ships they believe are supporting Israel. They don't appear worried about US retaliation. This creates a cycle, a dangerous one. The Houthis fire. The US retaliates. The Houthis respond again. And on and on. That's what makes this situation so unstable. And we haven't even mentioned Iran yet. Now, Iran hasn't claimed any role in this strike. But its support for the Houthis is no secret. So even if Iran isn't pulling the strings directly, this event adds to the larger tensions between Iran and the US, tensions that have existed for decades and have flared up multiple times over the years. If this strike on the US ship is seen as part of that bigger picture, the risk of a wider conflict increases. But here's an important reminder: not everyone wants a war. The United States has made it clear, it doesn't want to get dragged into another long, drawn-out conflict in the Middle East. The Houthis, while aggressive in rhetoric, also know that a full-scale war with the US could be devastating. So both sides are playing a very careful game. They want to show strength, but they don't want to tip the balance into something they can't control. That's what makes this moment so delicate. One wrong move, one misunderstood signal, one stray missile, and everything could escalate in a matter of hours. So, back to the original question: did the Houthis hit a US Navy ship by mistake, or seriously? Here's the most honest answer: we don't fully know. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Maybe it was a mix of miscalculation, pressure, and politics. Maybe it was a risky move intended to test limits. Or maybe it was a signal that future attacks will target anyone seen as supporting one side of the conflict, even if that means the United States. Whatever the reason, the consequences are real. Because now, we're in a place where military assets are being targeted, where the world's busiest trade routes are under threat, and where rival powers are circling each other, trying to avoid a full-blown confrontation, but also refusing to back down. So what happens next? That's the question everyone's asking. Will the US step up its attacks? Will the Houthis go further? Will Iran get involved more directly? Or is there still a chance for diplomacy to calm things down? At the moment, the answers aren't clear. But what is clear is that the Red Sea is no longer just a trade route. It's now a front line in a much larger power struggle. And whatever happens there, the rest of the world is going to feel it. Now, let's zoom out even more. The Red Sea crisis is just one layer of a much bigger geopolitical puzzle. The Middle East has always been a crossroads of conflict, ideology, and power plays. But what we're seeing today is a shift in how those power struggles are playing out. Non-state actors like the Houthis aren't just using rifles and roadside bombs anymore. They're launching missiles, flying drones, and targeting billion-dollar warships. This isn't guerrilla warfare. This is 21st century asymmetrical combat, where a relatively small group can punch way above its weight and make headlines across the globe. And that's part of why the world is paying such close attention. Because this isn't just about Yemen or even just about the US. It's about the future of warfare. About how technology, ideology, and regional alliances are changing the way conflict unfolds. And if the Red Sea becomes a case study in how a small force can disrupt a superpower's operations, we may see similar tactics emerge elsewhere, whether in the South China Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, or even cyber domains. Meanwhile, the diplomatic scene is heating up behind the curtains. Countries like Oman and Qatar, which have often played intermediary roles in regional disputes, are likely working overtime to establish backchannels. The United Nations is calling for restraint. European nations are watching with concern, especially those reliant on uninterrupted maritime trade through the Red Sea. Even China, deeply invested in shipping routes and stability in the region, may step in diplomatically to prevent further chaos. That's the scale we're talking about here. This isn't just a regional headache. It's a global balancing act. And the pressure on the Biden administration, it's mounting. Internally, voices in Washington are split. Some are calling for tougher military action, arguing that the US must deter any threats to its forces and interests with overwhelming power. Others warn against escalation, saying another entanglement in the Middle East could derail domestic priorities and drag the US into yet another protracted war. Public opinion also matters. After decades of Middle East conflict, there's little appetite among the American public for a fresh military campaign, especially one sparked by complex and murky provocations. There's also a legal dimension. Any sustained military action would need justification under both domestic and international law. Was the attack on the US Navy vessel an act of war? Does it authorize a broader military response? These aren't just academic questions, they're the ones being debated in government war rooms and international bodies as we speak. Because every move from here on out will set precedent, and missteps could haunt future administrations and future generations. On the other side, the Houthis are playing a dangerous but calculated game. They're aware that every strike, every claim of responsibility, every statement they make has international consequences. They know their actions draw headlines. They also know that with every missile launched, they risk provoking a response that could devastate their already war-torn territory. But they seem willing to take that gamble, perhaps banking on the idea that the US won't go too far, or that international sympathy for the Palestinian cause will provide them political cover. And let's not forget the human cost in all of this. Yemeni civilians, who've already endured years of war, famine, and disease, are once again in the crosshairs. Every escalation risks more airstrikes, more blockades, more suffering. These people aren't launching missiles or making war plans, they're just trying to survive. But once again, they are the ones who will pay the highest price for decisions made far above their heads. That's the tragedy of modern conflict. It rarely respects borders, and it almost never spares the innocent. Meanwhile, commercial shipping companies are facing impossible choices. Do they reroute their vessels, adding days or weeks to delivery times and driving up global costs? Do they continue sailing through dangerous waters, hoping their ships won't be targeted? Insurance premiums are already spiking. Some companies are pulling out altogether. And the longer this crisis drags on, the more we'll feel it in our supply chains, at the gas pump, and on our grocery store shelves. Conflict in the Red Sea doesn't stay in the Red Sea. It travels the world in containers and cargo holds. All of this leaves us at a crossroads. The next few weeks, maybe even the next few days, could shape the region's future for years. Will cooler heads prevail? Will there be a push for negotiation, or will one more missile launch trigger a chain reaction no one can stop? We don't have the answers yet, but what we do know is that the stakes are higher than they've been in years. And the world is watching, closely. So as we wait for the next headline, the next statement, the next strike, remember, this isn't just about politics or military strategy. It's about people, choices, and consequences. What happens next in the Red Sea could either pull us closer to peace, or drag us deeper into conflict. And right now, every decision counts. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. This is a fast-moving story, and we'll be here to break it down as it develops. Did you enjoy this video? Check out other clips of Amazing 7 and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified our latest videos.